For thousands of years, his name echoes through the ages, in ancient temples, in forgotten legends, in films, video games, novels, and even in our modern culture. A single hero continues to symbolize absolute strength: Heracles, or rather, Hercules, the Roman name by which the entire world came to know him. But behind the image of an invincible warrior lies a far darker story, a story of madness, of suffering, of divine vengeance, and of curse. For Heracles was not simply a hero. He was a man condemned from birth, a demigod hunted by the hatred of a goddess. And in this video, we will plunge into the terrifying origins of the one who would become the greatest hero of ancient Greece. Before his name became legend, before the monsters, before the 12 labors, before men even sang of his exploits, Heracles was already doomed. For his very birth was a crime in the eyes of the gods. It all began with Zeus, Lord of Olympus, king of the gods, a being as powerful as he was dangerous. For despite his immense power, Zeus was known for one thing in particular: his countless conquests. No law, no promise, not even his marriage to Hera could restrain his desires. And this time, his gaze fell upon a mortal woman named Alcmene. Alcmene was famous throughout Greece for her beauty, but also for her intelligence and virtue. Yet she already belonged to another man. Her husband was Amphitryon, a valiant warrior absent for several days due to war. But for Zeus, this mattered nothing. One night, the god descended to earth, and through his powers, he took on the exact appearance of Amphitryon. His voice, his face, his gestures, everything was perfect. Alcmene noticed nothing. She believed she was welcoming her husband home from battle. But that night, it was a god who shared her bed, and from this forbidden union was born a child unlike any other. A child already possessing abnormal power, divine strength, a future hero. But from his first breath, he attracted the hatred of Hera. For the queen of Olympus, this child was far more than a simple baby. He was living proof of Zeus's infidelity, and in the heart of the goddess, a terrible vengeance had just begun. Hera's hatred did not stop at the child's birth. On the contrary, it grew day by day. Every time the Queen of Olympus gazed upon the infant, she saw Zeus's betrayals again, and the more she looked at the child, the more her anger became uncontrollable. So one night, Hera decided to end it. The palace was shrouded in silence. Torches burned dimly along the stone walls, and in his chamber, young Heracles slept peacefully in his crib. That's when two creatures emerged from the darkness, two gigantic serpents. Their black scales gleamed in the moonlight. Their eyes seemed to burn with supernatural fire, and their venom was capable of killing a man in seconds. Silently, the monsters crawled through the room. Their breath hissed through the air. The crib's wood creaked softly. Everything seemed already decided. For what infant could have survived creatures sent by a goddess? The serpents slowly approached the child, opening their poisoned jaws. Then suddenly, something impossible happened. The baby opened his eyes, without fear, without crying, with the slightest sign of weakness. And before the creatures could even attack, Heracles reached out his small hands. He grasped both serpents by the throat. Then he squeezed, again and again, until their bodies stopped moving. When the adults entered the chamber, they discovered a terrifying scene. The infant sat in his crib, holding in his hands the corpses of the monsters. That evening, a chilling truth appeared before mortal eyes. This child was not human. He already possessed a power capable of defying creatures sent by the gods themselves. But Heracles' story does not end with the serpents, for another legend, even stranger, tells of an almost unreal episode, a tale mixing fear, divine cunning, and the birth of stars. According to certain myths, the infant's mother, Alcmene, lived in constant terror. Desperate gesture, Alcmene would have abandoned the baby in a remote forest, a silent place, cold, almost forgotten by the world. She hoped that a miracle, or perhaps destiny itself, would protect the child. And against all odds, someone found him. This person was none other than Athena, the goddess of wisdom, protector of heroes. When she discovered the abandoned infant, Athena immediately understood this was no ordinary child. But instead of hiding him, she had an idea both brilliant and dangerous. She decided to bring him directly to Hera. Yes, the same goddess seeking to destroy him. However, Athena revealed nothing. She claimed to have found a poor baby abandoned in the woods, an innocent child, fragile, hungry, who needed to be fed. Against all expectations, Hera accepted. Unaware that she held in her arms the illegitimate son of Zeus, the queen of Olympus brought the infant close to her. Then she let him drink her divine milk. But something unexpected occurred. The baby suckled with incredible force, a force almost impossible. The pain was so violent that Hera screamed and roughly pushed the child away. In the movement, a jet of divine milk crossed the night sky. An immense luminous trail appeared among the stars. And according to Greek legend, this is how the Milky Way was born. Ironically, in her anger, Hera had given the demigod she despised even greater power. For nourished by the milk of a goddess, Heracles was now more than a simple child. He was becoming a force destined to enter legend. Years passed, and young Heracles grew at an impressive rate. From childhood, he already surpassed other boys in size, strength, and endurance. No training seemed difficult enough for him. No trial seemed capable of stopping him. Like all sons of Greek nobles, Heracles received the education of future warriors and leaders. He was taught hand-to-hand combat, wrestling, archery, horseback riding, fencing, but also more refined arts such as music, poetry, and lyre playing. And in all these fields, the young demigod learned with almost supernatural speed. His masters already saw in him a future hero, a being destined for great things. But behind this exceptional strength, something disturbing was slowly growing in his mind. An uncontrollable anger, a brutal rage, instinctive, almost animal. Sometimes, a simple word was enough to trigger his fury. And the more powerful Heracles became, the more dangerous this anger grew. One day, while attending a music lesson, his teacher reproached him for his lack of discipline. The master tried to correct his lyre playing. He criticized his gestures, his impatience, his lack of delicacy. For despite his immense strength, Heracles could not tolerate being resisted, nor being humiliated. The musician continued to reprimand him, again and again, until something broke in the young boy's mind. Heracles' gaze suddenly changed. Anger invaded his face, a cold anger, terrifying. Then, in an uncontrollable fit of rage, he tore the lyre from the man's hands and struck his teacher with monstrous violence. The impact was so powerful that the musician collapsed immediately, dead. Silence filled the room. Even as a child, Heracles had already revealed something frightening. For his strength was not merely a gift, it was also a threat, a power capable of destroying everything around him when he lost control. And this was only the beginning. After his teacher's death, fear began to grow around young Heracles. Even his adoptive father, Amphitryon, understood that the demigod's strength was becoming dangerous. For Heracles was no longer a simple child. His power increased each day. And above all, his anger seemed impossible to control. Fearing another tragedy would occur, Amphitryon made a decision. He sent Heracles far from Greek cities, far from palaces, far from men. The young hero departed then into the mountains, where he spent months herding flocks, surrounded only by wind, forests, and the silence of wild lands. But according to an ancient Greek legend, it was during this exile that his destiny took a definitive turn. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, two mysterious figures supposedly appeared before him. Two women, two almost supernatural presences. The first was magnificent, elegant, smiling. Her gaze promised pleasure and happiness. She introduced herself as Vice. She approached Heracles and whispered seductive promises to him. An easy life, without suffering, without struggle. An existence filled with riches, pleasure, and rest. According to her, a man powerful enough to become king had no need to suffer to obtain what he desired. Then the second figure stepped forward. Unlike the other, she wore simple clothing. Her face was serious, calm, almost cold. She was virtue, and her words were quite different. She promised neither wealth nor immediate happiness. On the contrary, she announced a difficult life, a life filled with trials, pain, sacrifice, and endless battles. But at the end of this road, she promised something immortal, eternal glory, a name the world would never forget. Young Heracles remained silent. Then finally, he made his choice. He chose suffering. He chose battle. He chose the path of glory, without understanding that in accepting this path, he was also accepting an existence marked by tragedy, madness, and death.
Years passed, and Heracles gradually became the most feared man in Greece. His strength now surpassed that of ordinary warriors. Wherever he went, accounts of his exploits spread like legends, and soon his destiny led him to the great city of Thebes. At that time, the kingdom was experiencing a dark period. Enemies from neighboring regions imposed humiliating tributes upon the city. Riches, livestock, weapons. The inhabitants lived in fear and shame. The king of Thebes saw his power crumble, and no one seemed capable of saving the city. But when Heracles learned what was happening, his anger awakened once more. He gathered a group of warriors and took command of the army himself. The enemies thought they faced simple soldiers. They did not know they would face a demigod. The battle was swift, brutal, terrifying. Everywhere on the battlefield, Heracles crushed his adversaries with monstrous force. Shields shattered under his blows, enemy lines collapsed, and very quickly, the invaders understood they were not fighting an ordinary man. The hero's victory was total. Thebes was saved, and for the first time in a long while, the people finally celebrated a true protector. Grateful, the king offered Heracles the greatest reward possible, the hand of his daughter, Megara. The wedding was celebrated throughout the city. For a time, the demigod finally experienced something he had never truly had: happiness. With Megara, he founded a family. They had several children, and for the first time in his life, Heracles seemed to live in peace. Wars seemed distant, monsters silent. Even his anger seemed to have calmed. But in the heights of Olympus, someone continued to watch him: Hera. And the queen of the gods could not bear this sight. To see the illegitimate son of Zeus smile, to see this cursed child know love and peace, was an insult to her. So in the shadows, Hera made a terrible decision. She would destroy everything Heracles loved. So one night, she decided to strike the demigod where the pain would be most terrible. Not through weapons, not through monsters, but through his own mind. As night covered the palace, a supernatural madness slowly seized Heracles. His gaze changed, his breathing became heavy, and gradually reality disappeared around him. In his delirium, the walls of his house seemed to transform. Shadows became threatening. Familiar voices transformed into monstrous screams. Heracles believed he saw enemies, creatures come to kill him, assassins hidden in the darkness. Rage then rose in him like an unstoppable fire. Blinded by madness, the demigod seized his weapons, and he attacked, without hesitation, without understanding. In this nightmarish vision, his own family had become a threat in his eyes.
So he struck, again and again, until everything stopped. Then the madness disappeared, as suddenly as it had come. Silence filled the house. Heracles slowly opened his eyes and discovered the horror. Bodies stretched on the floor, blood, cries now silenced. His wife, his children, all dead by his own hand. The demigod fell to his knees, unable to speak, unable even to breathe. No creature, no monster, no enemy could have inflicted such terrible pain upon him. That day, the greatest hero of Greece also became a man destroyed by his own strength, a man haunted forever by the memory of those he had loved. And in the shadows, Hera finally watched the fall of the son of Zeus.
After the massacre of his family, Heracles was no longer the same man. The hero once admired throughout Greece now wandered like a broken soul. The weight of his crimes consumed him more each day. He barely slept anymore, and everywhere he looked, he believed he saw the faces of his children again. The silence of his empty house had become torture. But beyond the grief, a question haunted him ceaselessly. How could a man rise again after committing the irreparable? Seeking an answer, Heracles undertook a journey to the famous oracle of Delphi, the sacred sanctuary where mortals came to hear the will of the gods. In the depths of the temple, amid sacred smoke and mysterious chants, the demigod asked how he could atone for his crimes. The oracle's answer was immediate and terrible. To obtain forgiveness, Heracles had to abandon his freedom. He had to serve a man he despised, Eurystheus, the king of Mycenae, a sovereign known for his cowardice and jealousy. But that was not all. Eurystheus would impose upon the hero a series of nearly impossible trials, missions that no one else would have dared accept. Thus began the famous 12 labors of Heracles, trials designed to kill him. Face the monstrous lion of Nemea, whose hide could not be pierced by any weapon. Battle the Hydra of Lerna, a gigantic creature whose heads would regrow every time one was cut off. Capture alive the Erymanthian boar. Clean the stables of Algius, steal the sacred apples of the Hesperides, and most importantly, descend into the depths of the underworld to face Cerberus, the gigantic three-headed dog guarding the realm of the dead. Even the gods feared certain of these creatures, but Heracles, he, would have to face them alone. For these labors were not merely physical trials. They represented a path of suffering, of redemption, and of survival. But this story deserves its own chronicle in the darkness of Greek mythology.
After surviving the terrible 12 labors, Heracles continued his journey through Greece. Even after facing monsters capable of destroying entire kingdoms, the demigod never truly found peace. Wherever he went, violence, drama, and curses seemed to follow him. Yet, amid this tormented existence, Heracles eventually found love again. He married a woman named Dejanira, beautiful, courageous, and deeply devoted to the hero. For a time, the two spouses lived happily together. But in Greek legends, happiness never lasts very long. One day, as they traveled far from their kingdom, the couple arrived before a vast and dangerous river. The current was violent. The dark waters seemed capable of engulfing any traveler. That's when a strange creature appeared. Nessus, a gigantic centaur, half man, half horse. Nessus offered his help to the couple. He explained that he could carry Dejanira on his back so she could cross the river safely while Heracles would swim across on his side. The hero agreed, trusting. But once reaching the other shore, Nessus revealed his true nature. The centaur brutally attempted to abduct Dejanira. The young woman's screams immediately echoed through the valley, and when Heracles understood what was happening, his anger exploded. Without hesitation, he seized his bow, then released a deadly arrow, an arrow dipped in the venom of the Hydra of Lerna, the monster he had once defeated during his labors. The projectile pierced the centaur's body. The poison immediately began devouring his flesh. Nessus understood he was dying, but before his last breath, he decided to take revenge on the demigod. So, in a deceptive whisper, he spoke to Deianira. He told her that his blood possessed magical powers. According to him, this blood could prevent a man from ceasing to love his wife. He claimed it was a potion capable of preserving Heracles' love eternally. Deianira believed him, and before the centaur died, she preserved some of his blood, not knowing that she had just kept in her hands the poison that would one day cause the fall of the greatest Greek hero. Even after surviving countless trials, the fate of Heracles remained marked by suffering. The monsters he had faced, the wars, the curses, all of this was nothing compared to what would ultimately destroy him. And as often in Greek tragedies, disaster was born from love. Years after the centaur Nessus' death, Deianira began to live in fear. Fear of losing her husband, fear that Heracles would fall in love with another woman. For wherever the demigod went, his glory attracted admiration and desire. And gradually, Deianira recalled the final words of the dying centaur. This supposedly magical blood, capable of preserving a man's love. Desperate, she decided to use what she believed was a love potion. She took a tunic belonging to Heracles and soaked it in Nessus' blood. Then she gave it to the hero, completely unaware that she had just given him his death sentence. When Heracles put on the tunic, everything changed. Atrocious pain immediately coursed through his body. The poison contained in the centaur's blood, mixed with the venom of the Hydra of Lerna, began to burn his living flesh. The suffering was unbearable. The hero screamed in agony. He tried to tear off the tunic, but the fabric seemed glued to his skin. Every movement tore away pieces of flesh. The poison slowly devoured his body. Even Heracles, the most powerful of Greek heroes, could not resist such torture, and he understood quickly he was going to die. So, in a final act of courage, the demigod went to an isolated mountain. There, in a fit of pain and rage, he tore several gigantic trees from the ground with his bare hands. Then he built an immense funeral pyre. Flames began to rise toward the sky, and Heracles, without fear, lay himself atop the burning coals, finally accepting his fate. Fire slowly consumed his mortal body, but at the heart of the flames, the legend did not die out. For when the hero's body disappeared, his divine part left the world of men, and under the gaze of the gods, the soul of Heracles rose toward Olympus. There, the son of Zeus finally obtained immortality. The cursed hero had become a god. Even after his death, Heracles never truly disappeared. On the contrary, it was after leaving the world of mortals that his legend became eternal. Throughout ancient Greece, his name was spoken with admiration, but also with fear. For the ancient Greeks, Heracles was not merely a warrior, he had become a symbol, the symbol of man capable of surviving the impossible. Some cities even venerated him as a true divine protector. Temples were built in his honor. Gigantic statues represented his exploits, and each year, great celebrations were organized to commemorate his adventures. For several days, Greek cities hosted sporting games, contests, music competitions, and immense ceremonies dedicated to the demigod become immortal. Crowds cheered his name, poets told of his battles, and the ancients passed his story to new generations. For beyond his monstrous strength, what truly fascinated men was his ability to endure suffering. Heracles had lost his family, faced terrifying monsters, known madness, pain, solitude, and yet he continued forward, again and again. This is why his story crossed the centuries, because fundamentally, Heracles represented something deeply human, the struggle against our own darkness, the battle against our fears, our mistakes, our regrets. And even today,
Thousands of years after ancient Greece's disappearance, his legacy remains alive in films, series, novels, comic books, video games, and in almost every tale inspired by mythological heroes. His image has become universal: the invincible warrior, the cursed hero, the man capable of facing the most terrifying creatures. But behind this image lies a darker truth. For Heracles' most dangerous enemy was neither the Hydra nor Cerberus, nor the monsters sent by the gods. It was his own anger, his own suffering, his own demons. And perhaps this is why his story continues to fascinate us today. Because fundamentally, the myth of Heracles speaks also of us, of our ability to fall, to suffer, and despite everything, to continue forward in the darkness.
Thus ends this plunge into the dark and tragic history of Heracles. But this is only the beginning. For soon, in Shadow Chronicles, we will explore the terrifying 12 labors of the demigod, the monsters he faced, the curses he endured, and the darkest secrets of his myth. So, if this video pleased you, do not hesitate to subscribe to Shadow Chronicles. And tell me in the comments, which of Heracles' labors would you like to discover first? For in the ancient legends, the true monsters are not always those we believe them to be.